So I purchased Ableton a while back and I've been working with it a little bit in the background, but this week I wanted to try to test the workflow of FL Studio against Ableton with what I know right now, and I want to show you the comparison between the two. So here's the basic setup. I have this clip of a song that I want to start fleshing out into a full song, and I'm going to bring that into both FL Studio and Ableton and then work through the process of what it's like to start building out a track in each one of those things, doing very similar things and showing you how it's different from one program to the other. So let's jump in. So one of the first things that I do is drag the sample into FL Studio so that I can start figuring out what the tempo is for it and then start to build out the instruments for it. So I dragged this sample in. I figured out what the tempo was already, but I'll show you how I go about that process. So I brought it in and I'll let you listen to the sample so you can hear it. She whispers in the wind, the secrets of. So usually what I'll do with FL Studio is I'll come over here to where it has the tempo, add it, and I will right click on it, open up where it says tap, and then I'll play the song and then just click out what the tempo is as I'm going along. So if I do that, she whispers in the wind, the secrets of her heart, and hopes they find a way. So after a little while it kind of dials into what the right tempo should be. And then I will just zoom in by holding down Alt and then using my mouse wheel and then doing the same thing with Control. And I will just make sure that I place a downbeat on one of those markers for the start of the song. So we're basically starting right at that line and then turn the metronome on. She whispers in the wind, the secrets of her heart. And if you need to move the track around at all or just dial it in a little more especially, you can hold down Alt, and then when you left click it'll slide a little bit easier so you can line it up a little more precisely, because if you let go of Alt and you try, it'll just move you by the beat or whatever the line is that you have selected over here, whether that's a quarter step or something else along those lines. So now I have that lined up, and the next thing that I need to start working on is bringing in some instruments to start reconstructing this song. So one of the first things that I did was grab a bass line. So I went in here and I pulled up GMS to make a bass, and I decided I wanted to do something like a Reese bass. So I ended up coming in here and just working on this a little bit until I came up with a good bass sound, and it sounded like this. So then I just came in here and figured out what the notes were for the song. So with the GMS, figured out that the first note was a B and then the second note was an E, so I just kind of played that back and forth. So let me turn this one on, let me come back out here and unmute or mute those other ones so you can just hear the bass sound. So that was the bass, and then the next thing that I came in to work on was the drums. So I used Battery, which is by Native Instruments, and brought up that one. So I used for this one the Black Tiger kit, which I think is out of the Golden Kingdom or one of those other sound packs. And I pulled this kit up, and this is what it sounds like. So I just listened through the sample again just to get a feel for what the drums were doing. She whispers in the wind. And then I went ahead and laid in the drums using a MIDI keyboard and then recording that. So I would come up here to this record button, make sure that it was armed to record the notes, and then I would come in, I was on pattern 1 already where I had the bass line. So then I just came in here, started it up about here, and then let me make sure I did this right. Yeah, so started about a bar beforehand, and then went ahead and pressed the record button, and then I went ahead and mapped in the drums, and so the drums ended up sounding like this.
She whispers in the wind the secrets of her heart.
And I didn't map in everything exactly right. I just wanted to get the basic feel of the song. And so the next part that I wanted to get down was the keys. So I opened up Contact, which is also a native instrument one, came into the factory library and just grabbed the upright piano. Went up to some of the upper registers on the keyboard, changed the sound a little bit, but not a ton. And then I went ahead and just recorded in what that piano part was doing. So now what I have so far sounds like this as far as the arrangement goes. All right, so then the next piece that I wanted to get down was the actual electric guitar. So you can hear that here, which is one of the main elements inside of that song. So what I did to do that was opened up the mixer, and then I came over here to one of the open tracks, and that was, I think, track 5. And so I set it up to be recording from input 1 on my audio interface, and then I loaded in on the mixer the guitar rig 5, and then dialed in a setting that I felt was right for that particular song. And so this was the setting that I used for that main driving guitar, distorted guitar sound. So you can look at that for what the settings were. And then I also put on a reverb to give it a little bit more space and kind of fill it into the song a little bit. And so this is what that sounded like together when I finished recording that. And there was also this other little part that was kind of driving. It was just like this tonal sound that was going on, kind of just chugging in the background. And so I ended up coming back in and creating another channel, put another guitar rig on that, and dialed in a sound for that one that sounded like this. And so when I recorded that part, this is what that ended up sounding like. So with the guitar, and then with the rest of the instruments. So now I have the basic setup of that clip, and now I can start to expand that out to build the rest of the song. So I would obviously put some vocals in and some background vocals and maybe some other instruments as well, and then I'll start building out the other sections, so like the verse or a bridge or some other elements to this song. But that's the process that I use, that's the workflow that I use when I'm going with FL Studio and trying to flesh out something where I had put together a clip earlier, I had a song idea earlier, and now I want to bring it in and make a full arrangement out of it. So the first thing that I did when I got into Ableton was to drag the sample in, and I started in the session view, which I have found out that I like the session view for certain ways of doing things, but not necessarily everything. So I dragged the sample into here, and then I opened up the sample, and I tried to detect the tempo by using this tap tempo thing. And I kind of screwed this up because I didn't realize in Ableton that you have to turn off the warp in order to mess with the tempo and not get it to mess with the pacing of the audio file. So I would listen to the file and try to figure out what the pacing was, and then try to tap that tempo out, and then it would end up warping the audio file to that tempo. And so I ended up having to go and search this out a video And so I went into Google and I searched out detect tempo in Ableton, and this first video that came up was how to find BPM tempo fast in Ableton by a YouTube username Sendai Mike. And I watched his video and then realized when he was doing the tap tempo that he didn't have the warp marker on. And so that helped me understand that I needed to do things a little differently in order to line it up. But his video was really helpful in figuring out in Ableton how to do that process to line that sample up to the grid and get a feel for it. So again, mine ended up being a little bit different than what I did in FL Studio, because I ended up warping the sample, and so it ended up being a little bit faster. So I ended up with a BPM of 149, whereas in FL Studio I had a BPM of about 144. So that was the first issue that I ran into with it. So loading in instruments is actually pretty easy inside of Ableton. So I knew that I wanted to just start out with drums, so I ended up just grabbing battery and then just dragging it onto the channel. And when you drag it into the channel, it just drops it in and it loads it up, and then you can click on the wrench icon down here to open up that thing. So I just opened up the same drum pack that I was using in the other one, which was the Black Tiger kit, which is from the Golden Kingdom sample pack, I believe, from Native Instruments. And so ended up doing the same kind of thing and just worked out the drums for this one. So pretty similar thing to what I did for the other one. And then the next thing that I ended up doing was creating a bass. So I again wanted a Reese bass kind of sound for this, but I ended up using the wavetable plugin. So I came over here to instruments and then dragged and dropped that into a new channel. And then I went through and worked on creating a bass sound from that, and then just threw a saturator plugin on it and ended up creating the bass sound, which sounds like this. So pretty similar to what was happening before. And then the next thing that I ended up working on was Guitar Rig 5. So one of the things that I do really like about Ableton is just the ease of being able to drag in plugins, but also instruments, and be able to see everything from the same window, rather than having to change between different windows like I do on FL Studio. So in FL Studio, I have to have the mixer up if I'm doing some audio things, and then I have to have the channel rack up if I'm loading in some VST instruments, and then I have to bounce back and forth between those. Whereas in Ableton, I can just come in here to this little setup on same window on the session view, and then I just dragged in Guitar Rig over an audio channel, dropped that in, and did the same kind of thing. Just opened up this setting, had the same setting that I had in the other one, and then dropped in the RC48 same kind of way to get the similar effect, and then recorded those. And recording is really easy inside of here as well. You just basically hit the record button, you arm the track for recording, and then you just go ahead and record it. And it's pretty straightforward. Another thing that I like about Ableton is that it organizes all of your recorded audio in a pretty clean file structure for your projects. And so that just automatically saves everything right there, which I appreciate, because it makes everything neat and nice. And then I did another sound, another Guitar Rig one, loaded that into a new channel, same kind of setting that I did for that other one, and ended up with this sound. Oh, I forgot to show you the other one. This is the other electric guitar. And this is the other guitar sound. And then the last thing that I did was drag in the upright piano to go ahead and record those things. And then so all that together now sounds like this. So everything went in pretty smoothly. I would have probably preferred to have done that in the this grid mode, or I'm not sure what they call it, session view and the other view. So whatever this view is called, which is more like a timeline based thing, I probably should have created everything from this perspective. That would have made my life a little bit easier. But I do like the feature of being able to do session mode where you can try some different ideas and just kind of bounce between those before you commit to anything. So that's a really nice feature inside of Ableton that I like a lot. And so to just finish this song out, I'll do the same kind of thing where I'll flesh out the arrangement a little bit more. I'll probably come up with some different chord progressions, maybe layer in a couple more instruments, do the vocals, and then hopefully have a full song put together using both Ableton and FL Studio, just testing the workflow between the two and figuring out what works and what I'd like and I don't like between the two different systems. And just, I wanted to bring you guys along for the ride. Well, hopefully that was helpful for you to be able to see the difference between FL Studio and Ableton and how to use those programs to put together some basic ideas that you're trying to flesh out into a song. If you're interested in getting a little bit deeper into FL Studio and figuring out how to put together an entire song, I have a free 3-part series that you can sign up for in the link in the description below. It's going to walk you through how to use the program to do things like record VST instruments or use MIDI keyboards to put together parts for drums, or record a live instrument, or record your voice, and put all that together into a song structure. So if you're interested in that, check out the link in the description below. If you haven't subscribed, go ahead and subscribe. Turn on the notification bell so you can get alerted every time I post a new video, and I will see you in the next round.